Smoak.
All right, here we go on Thursdays at 4. Unless he is stirring up trouble in the college football realignment landscape and expansion. And even when he is, Max Olson, theathletic.com, good friend of the show, great friend of the show, joins us on Sikkim 365 Radio. So you've been busy. Of course, this is something that I'm sure has given you a little extra to-do list and due diligence to do, and you were always doing that anyway. But so, Brigham Young, UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston, at least those being discussed most seriously, or seriously the most. Is this something that you feel like is going to be still long-term, nothing happens for a few months, or do you feel like the Big 12 would like to have something in the next few weeks?
Yeah, you guys know how this thing is. It's like, once again, we're talking about something where it's like, yeah, this seems like it's moving a little bit faster than anticipated. Certainly when you get 8 ADs together in Dallas like they did this week, even if those guys are able to all get on the same page and sort of work in lockstep, as we all know, when it comes to realignment, it's still a matter of selling presidents and getting them on board and dealing with whatever concerns pop up for them. So, you can't say any of this stuff is set in stone, but certainly it's looking pretty good right now that, yeah, this could be, you hear a lot of different timelines from people in sort of the short-term one here of, when would they add these schools? Could be a few weeks, could be later this season, could be sometime during the school year. I think there still is a lot of work to be done and in sort of working through all the details here. Obviously, we don't know what year you'd bring candidates in. You still have Texas and Oklahoma and their departure to figure out. It's a lot to work through, but yeah, certainly right now things are moving in a direction where if everyone can agree on these 4 schools, this could potentially move pretty quickly.
If you were Texas and Oklahoma, would you not want these 8 schools to figure out what they're going to do pretty quickly so that maybe you can do what you want to do quicker? And how could they aid in this at all?
Yeah, I think that this is a good development for Texas and Oklahoma getting out of the Big 12. I think that they have potentially an opening here, or at least a case to be made that, look, all right, congrats Big 12, you figured it out. You've added members. You're going to go to 12. Good job. This is great for your future. We're glad this conference is not dying. But why do you need us here? Is it fine for us to just walk out the back door now? And so, look, I don't know. Maybe this stability and getting some clarity on this, maybe that does sort of simmer some of the tensions, and people are willing to get into those kind of negotiations with Oklahoma and Texas about about the exit and all that. I don't know, but certainly that is an element of this that is very important to figure out. And if you can get this kind of setup figured out here, then yeah, I think if you're Texas and Oklahoma, I still think that it's. I do not think they're in the SEC next year, but if they were to give notice at the end of December and leave in 2023, maybe that's maybe depending on how this TV stuff all works out, maybe that's okay.
Max, do you think that the conference, from your understanding, is set on 4 as just the ideal, not much more than that? Because obviously that would leave out a school like a Memphis, and it leads me to wonder, what is the discussion as far as you're hearing on Houston because of the Texas factor that could be a positive for them, that could also be a negative for them. So I'm just curious if they're sold on 4 and why a Houston versus perhaps a Memphis, for example.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's certainly been one of the questions I've been trying to figure out in working to report this is, you're looking at these 4, but could it be 2? Could it be, 6 or 8? I mean, what exactly ends up being sort of like the comfortable move here? And I think if you go to 4 and if you end up with making the Big 12 a 12-team conference again, I don't know that necessarily precludes you from someday looking at this and saying, maybe this makes sense to go to 16 and do sort of the pod scheduling and, especially if you're spread out all over the country, maybe there's some convenience there if there's an opportunity. But it seems like right now the focus is more on 4, and partially I think that's maybe because, it gets you to 12, but also this is a 4 that I think people are not having that hard of a time agreeing on. Now, Houston is of the 4, Houston is certainly the one that generates the most debate. And, leading up till today, I've even, reported, that there was reluctance to engage with Houston, going back to their feelings on Tillman Fertitta and just sort of what Houston, what the ego level maybe you're dealing with there if you bring Houston into the conference. But it does seem like people are willing to sort of set aside these differences in politics and say, it's hard to justify leaving Houston out, and that Houston could, strengthen this conference. I don't know today, how all three of the Texas schools feel about that. But from what I've been told, it doesn't sound like there's that much opposition to it. And, you can sort of, like in 2016, there was these different, there was sort of this perception that they didn't add value. I'm sure there's a debate to be had about what does Houston bring to the Big 12 and what does it cost the three Texas schools and all that. But it seems like right now people are having an easier time. I think there is momentum now in terms of agreeing that Houston sort of fits and makes sense right now.
They have an AD at Baylor who helped create some things and momentum at Houston. He would know where the skeletons are, what the pros and cons. I mentioned that a few minutes ago. So, maybe he can be a voice of reason, or even he could also say, hey, wait a minute, this is some of the issues. But if, in fact, adding Houston allows this conference to survive, and if that's one of the options that gives them some opportunities revenue-wise, streaming-wise, whatever-wise, then they can't be too picky, can they?
Well, and this also, excuse me, this also goes back to one of the things that people say, and maybe it's revisionist history, I don't know, but one of the things people say is that back in 2016, the one difference between this process right now and back then is that, ultimately Texas did not want Houston in the Big 12. And so right now we're going through a process where Texas and Oklahoma are not dictating the decisions. And so from that standpoint, I understand that the three Texas schools would have opposition to that, or have some fear that, if we bring Houston into this conference from a football standpoint, they could become very competitive very quickly. But as we've seen from TCU, but it does seem like, bottom line, this is about making your conference as competitive and compelling a football conference as possible. And from that standpoint, it's hard to. And you're right, Mac Rhodes and others have done a great job of upgrading Houston over time to get them ready for this opportunity. But it's just kind of, I'm sure there's still going to be some debate about it, but it does seem like Houston's in a lot better position than I thought they were a few weeks ago.
How much are potential TV partners involved in this phase of it, with the Big 12 ADs and presidents telling them what would make them more attracted to a TV deal that would be to their liking? Because again, and Max, we talked about this before, they're getting $37 million now, probably close to $40 by the end of the deal that they have with ESPN. That's not going to happen this time around. How do they get back to where they can subsist and where it would be happy for them?
Yeah, it's a great question. And those of us that are on the outside of this, you do wonder, like, how do you go through all this and put a plan together when you don't know what the price is, But I think from my understanding is, yes, you do work with consultants on this who give you a sense of, what are the members that can maximize value. Obviously, they brought Oliver Luck into the mix here because he has some of those connections, and it can kind of help, I think, be a little bit of a middleman to give you a better sense of what that looks like. But, and he knows lots of folks. But, yeah, that is a part of this, obviously. And that's, when I don't know if these schools are coming in 2024, 2025. Are you bringing them in at reduced distribution? What is the value to the potential TV partners on that next deal? That's all. These are all sort of unknowns in all this. But, certainly it seems like there's an understanding in the Big 12 that, yes, if there's a hit involved here, that's to be expected. Because there's not some combination of schools among the group of five that gets you what Texas and Oklahoma gave you. But, it looks like this is the setup that potentially puts them in the best position.
Max, one thing I'm really curious about with the timeline and everything is the fact that the Big 12's grant of rights still do run out in, 4 years? So if you're adding teams in the next couple of years to bring them into your brand new conference, but then 2 years after they sign up, there's the threat of teams leaving again, right? So has there been any discussion as far as you're concerned or anything that you've heard on, as part of these negotiations or whatever, that there's also talk of these 8 schools signing an extended grant of rights agreement to solidify the Big 12?
Very good question. I don't have an answer for you on that right now. I think that, again, I think that the Pac-12 situation last Thursday, closing the door on that, I think has led to some of these Big 12 schools saying, okay, we don't have other options. We have to come to the table here and mean it when we say that we need to be united and work in lockstep and work to make this conference better. I'm sure there are probably still some presidents that think, well, who knows what things look like in a couple of years? Maybe, if you're at West Virginia, maybe you do still hold on to that hope a little bit that the ACC is going to someday have a spot for you, or maybe you do wonder if the Pac-12 will revisit their decision as they get closer to their TV deal expiring in 2024. So that's a very good question. I do wonder if you go through expansion, you would think that this is a move that probably gives Bob Bowlesby an opportunity to approach them and say, hey, we need to extend this and show our commitment to this conference. And so, there's been reports, obviously, that they tried to do that previously when it came to talking about the new TV stuff, and that these 8 were for it, and Texas and Oklahoma were against it. So I do wonder how much that's changed. But yeah, it's a totally valid question of how committed are these schools to staying in the Big 12 beyond 2025. And I don't know that you would go through expansion, and make additions if other schools were still trying to get out.
You would think if they're going to expand that they have to be able to have some conversations with a TV network about something being extended. Otherwise, it's like, as you said, it's like putting a Band-Aid on the problem on what is a gash. Max, I don't know if you could answer this or not. I don't think anyone can, but I know that because of all the stuff you do and who you have connections and sources, and we have ours as well, do you feel any different about the Big 12's health now than you did back a month ago?
It's funny because I think a month ago, I think that some of the first stuff I was writing about this was, and maybe this was felt a little optimistic at the time, but from the start of this, I've written that I feel like, this is the future of the Big 12 comes down to whether these 8 members can trust each other, and can also come to the conclusion that ultimately, if the other Power 5 leagues don't want to add you, then, you have more value together as 8 than you do separately by trying to go off to a different conference. And so it seems like for the last month, we've gone through that process of, trying to feel out, will the SEC add more? Will Pac-12 take us? Will Big Ten do anything? Will the ACC, I think that these schools had to go through that process and find out, is there anything out there? Is there any way out here? But it still comes back to that original, I think, line of thinking that for this conference to survive, these 8 have to work together and collaborate and trust each other. And I think that's what happened on Tuesday and Wednesday when these ADs got together. I think that has begun to happen. I do think if you go through this process and add these 4 schools, I think that it brings some stability and some security to the Big 12. I would think that it gives people, a little more confidence here that this is going to still be perceived as a Power 5 conference and better than the AAC and all that. And we'll see where the money ends up. But I do think in terms of status and stature, it is important to make these additions. And, I don't think anyone's talking anymore about this Big 12 is going to implode. I think that's why these folks are working together, because they understand if you have nowhere else to go, then we have no choice but to do the best we can here to make the Big 12 as strong of a football conference as possible. And look, I think these 4 schools also help you in basketball, and I know that's obviously important in Waco.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry.
I want to ask about a game. I mean,
wait a minute.
We got games going on, man. Yeah. We got games going on, and I know we're short on time here, Max. So there's several I would love to ask you about. I mean, but the biggest one is Georgia-Clemson on paper. So if I could only ask you about one, how about that one? Georgia-Clemson, what are your thoughts on the game this Saturday?
Why would you do that to me? You know how busy I've been. I mean, what am I supposed to say?
Sorry.
It's cool. It's awesome. I mean, I think it's awesome that we've got a real playoff caliber kind of game to start this off, and that whoever loses this, kind of has to run the table here. And I think it's going to be. I think that Clemson will pull it out, but man, I wouldn't be that surprised if Georgia just sort of showed America they've recruited at almost as high level as Alabama. This is the year when it should show up. You've got the quarterback. You've got all these future NFL players all over the field. And I think you saw how different they were once JT Daniels did take over late last season. So, I wouldn't be surprised if the conversation on Monday is, wow, Georgia should be number 1 in the country, and maybe they have a chance to play for a national title this year. This is Kirby Smart's big chance here to make a huge statement and, beat Clemson and Ungulele and all that. But I think it's going to be a hell of a game, and I look forward to that. Kind of setting, maybe the conversation next week actually will be about college football and who the best teams are and not all the other issues that are going on.
One can hope.
Yeah, there are a handful of them. And, there's we've even had some on the chat room talking about there's a group of 5 playoff game between Boise State, UCF tonight.
Houston.
Texas Tech against Houston.
There's a bunch of, Big Ten is playing a bunch of legitimate week 1 games.
Yeah.
I think it's a pretty fun schedule here. So I'm looking forward to sitting on the couch on Saturday and taking it all in.
Florida State trying to get themselves something against Notre Dame, Miami,
How's that going to go, Paul?
Alabama.
What do you got on that one, Paul?
I want it to be less than 21. If it's less than 21, then
Are they going with Milton or are they going with Travis?
I bet you they probably go with Milton, and then they have a package for Travis. But the fact that they haven't said bothers me a little bit. So it's only a secret. I learned this when Art Briles is here, Max. His first game, he wouldn't say who the starter was. It's only a secret for a minute.
Yeah,
that's
true.
it. It's only a secret for a minute, and then.
Max, I got a question for you. Since I was born, I've been spoiled in the last few years. I have a college football team that we.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go.
I've never jumped off the bandwagon. I never have, and because we were spoiled. I mean, seriously, forever.
Yeah.
God, you promised me this year something different than what I saw Saturday. You told me.
I didn't promise you. What are you talking about?
I don't think I heard him promise anything.
It must have been a dream.
Yeah.
Smokey, the expectations have changed so much that people here were just hoping to get to 6 wins, and now even that doesn't look
No,
very
and now you got one of those you thought you could chalk up, and God, the donors buying tickets. Hey, man, thanks for your time, buddy. Great stuff. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
That's Max.